thought about just staying up there, shouting down. It's wonderful to get a chance to visit Albuquerque again, a place that's always been one of my favorite places to visit. This is my first time, though, visiting as FBI director, and I'm in month 4 of a 10-year term, and I'm here because I wanted to see the FBI. The FBI is a deployed army. We are here and in 55 other divisions throughout the country and in 64 offices around the world. We are truly a deployed army, responding to all kinds of threats and responding to all of them, though, in partnership with the people you see represented here behind me. One of the highlights of this visit was to get a chance to meet with the fired up law enforcement crew that is represented here. Federal, state, and local enforcers of all kinds who've come together to protect the people of New Mexico and of the United States. So I thank them for their work and for the work of the people that they represent. As director, one of the first things that I dealt with was a challenge related to the budget. We were impacted severely by the so-called sequestration. The good news is that 2 weeks ago, Congress passed a budget that adequately funds the FBI and will allow me again to begin hiring the men and women that I need to staff our offices as intelligence analysts and as special agents. So I look forward to doing that right away. As the FBI, our #1 priority is and remains the promise we've made to the American people that we will do everything in our power to keep you safe from terrorist attack. It's something I wake up every morning worrying about and go to bed every night worrying about. And the threat I worry about is actually different than the one I knew 8 years ago when I last was in government. In some ways, I think of the Al-Qaeda threat as a cancer. The central tumor, which was centered on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, has been significantly diminished. What else? Yes, sir.
What's the risk for national security from the drug cartels from Mexico, specifically in New Mexico? How is the influence that they have over here?
Well, drug cartels, international drug cartels, and the trafficking associated with them, movement of money, drugs, and human beings, because we often see those routes being used for human trafficking, continue to be a significant threat that we face in New Mexico and throughout the whole country, not just along the border. So I wish I had good news to say there, except that we're staying at it, all of us who are represented here today. But it continues to pose an enormous threat of violence and threats to the fiber of our communities.
What do you learn from a visit like today? Obviously, we have some unique challenges in our state with the border, tribal lands. What do you learn from a visit like today?
Yeah, in addition to discovering that you actually have a remarkable barbecue here now, and much better weather than we have in the Northeast, I learned that, well, something I knew from afar, but feel up close. We in the national security law enforcement business have here in New Mexico an astounding variety of challenges, right? From national labs to Indian country to national forests to international drug trafficking to violent crime, all the things that many states face in pieces. That entire menu is presented to law enforcement and national security organizations here. The good news is I've also learned that we've got amazing people deployed in really smart ways here. So I want to freak people out by talking about the size of the menu, because arrayed against that menu is an incredible team. And so that has been confirmed for me, which is what makes this such a pleasant visit. I don't leave here thinking, oh my goodness, we have problems. I leave here realizing we have problems and we're arrayed in a good way against those problems.
The Department of Justice has outlined certain criteria that they're looking for in monitoring the success of Colorado's marijuana legalization. I was wondering if we as New Mexicans are going to see the FBI doing anything to, one, gauge how successful that is, or two, if there's anything that we're going to see in New Mexico for enforcement around Colorado.
Yeah, I don't have a good, thoughtful answer on that, because I really don't, it's not, I used to say the pot's not the FBI's thing, and then people thought I was teasing or something. It really hasn't been something that I've focused on much. I know my brothers and sisters in the DEA think about it in a much better way than I do, so I'd shift that question over to them.
Director Comey, what about public corruption? You mentioned El Paso, that was one of the things that you want to tackle. Public corruption in New Mexico, can you talk a little bit more about that?
I don't want to talk specifically about New Mexico public corruption. As I said, in El Paso, human institutions are peopled by humans, and so public corruption will always be with us. It tends to run in streaks in different places, and then we in law enforcement respond aggressively and drive change into a culture, and then it pops up someplace else. So it's work that's never done, but because it's so important to our communities and to our country, it's one that remains a priority of the FBI. So we devote resources to it here to make sure we're keeping an eye on it, just as we do in all of our field offices.
Director, we're coming up on the 5th anniversary of the discovery of a mass graveyard in Albuquerque's West Mesa. There are numerous theories on who murdered these women. Is there any update from the FBI on the search for who's responsible? Are you guys still helping on this case?
I don't have any update to offer you on that. Sorry to say.
Is there something particular that's the greatest concern of the New Mexico branch of the FBI or office?
I wouldn't highlight one particular concern. Obviously, counterterrorism and counterintelligence, as they are nationwide, are also our top priorities here in New Mexico. But as I said, we face a variety of challenges across the spectrum here in New Mexico and try to address them in partnership with our state and local enforcers. Sometimes it sounds like a platitude, but that cooperation is the only way we get the job done. Right? None of us have the resources alone to deal with these challenging problems. And so the task forces we form together are the answer. My sense, and it was confirmed by my conversations here, they're particularly effective here in Albuquerque, something I'd like to see spread all over the country. But I wouldn't single anything out other than counterterrorism and counterintelligence.
Have you identified or have you seen in your time there any sort of lessening of the FBI's prioritization of national security as being number one, and what might that look like going forward when you feel like you as the director can focus on other things or prioritize other things?
It'll be a wonderful day, and I hope I'll have a press conference to announce if that day ever comes, when the counterterrorism threat doesn't justify it being the number one priority of the FBI. I can't see that day from here, and I only have a 10-year term. So it'll probably be the next director who's able to contemplate such a wonderful day. As I said, it's a challenge we've made great progress against, especially with our military brothers and sisters, but then the threat has metastasized. So it's a day that's in the long distant future when we're able to consider that no longer being the FBI's number one priority.
Director Comey, can you talk a little about Indian country and sexual assaults? That has been a challenge in trying to combat that in Indian country, especially here in New Mexico within the Indian pueblos. Can you talk about any changes in that direction?
Yeah, I don't know enough at this point to say. I know it's an enormous challenge, violent crime of all kinds in Indian country. When I was Deputy Attorney General, I visited Albuquerque and visited a number of reservations so I can understand the challenge they face better. It's something we at the FBI take very seriously and devote a lot of resources to, especially in New Mexico and in Arizona. But I'm too new on the job to offer you anything more than that. Yes, sir.
We have some people that are, paranoid about the Department of Justice and the FBI snooping on them and things of that nature. There were some high-profile things that came out over the last couple of years. Is that something that you have to work on as far as with the American people, as far as getting their trust back that they can count on the Department of Justice and the FBI to be doing the right things?
The trust of citizens in the Department of Justice and the FBI is essential to the work that we do. One of my frustrations in the recent storm of controversy around surveillance is that it's been hard to find space in that storm to explain to people what our powers are and how we're using them. I believe all Americans should be suspicious of government power. Right? This nation was built by people who were suspicious of government power, which is why they wrote the Constitution that they did in divided power. I am, they should be, and I should explain my authorities. The one thing people should know in just a brief sound bite is the FBI operates under lawful, strict oversight and scrutiny by Congress, the courts, and other parts of the executive branch. When we collect information that is the content of an email or a telephone conversation, we're doing it pursuant to a showing of probable cause we've made to a federal judge who's given us authority to do that. It is ordinary, but very important stuff to understand, the way in which the FBI conducts itself. One of my frustrations with the storm in the wake of the so-called Snowden revelations is the sense that good people have that the government is engaged in rogue conduct or something. That's nonsense. People may have different views about policy choices about surveillance, but it's simply not true that any part of the intelligence community has been acting outside the law. Now, we can all discuss what the law should be. We're talking about people who are, I think the right word is maniacal about compliance in the intelligence community, want to follow law and have followed the law. That's one of my frustrations. Yes, sir.
You mentioned about new jobs for the FBI. Do you know how many of these will impact directly to New Mexico?
I don't yet, I don't. We're still figuring that out. As you might imagine, there are lots of places in the FBI's world where folks are asking for resources, and we're trying to sort that out right now. We just got the budget 10 days ago. Okay? Listen, thank you all. You live in a pretty special place, the Treasury. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.